It's January 8th, 2008. This is the interview with Mrs. Leola Locklear and Layman Locklear, brother and sister, great-grandchildren of Henry Barry Lowrie. Miss Leola, you were going to explain to us about your working with the Tuscarora in the early 70s through the 80s. You want to explain what you were just saying a few minutes ago?
Well, I wanted to really find out what tribe did we descend from. And I'd work a while, make me some money, and then I'd do research a while. The further I went back, the more I was learning, what tribe we did originate from. And I couldn't find it nowhere I ever went and searched that we was Lumbee Indians. We were never given that name, truthfully, to be a tribal name. There was no tribe named Lumbees. That name comes from the river, which was better known as Drowning Creek. And Lumberton comes from Lumber River. That's the reason it's called Lumberton. And the further I went back, the more I was learning. And we originated from the Tuscaroras in Bertie County. They settled on Lumber River. And the second James Lowrie, he was the first to build a bridge to refer people from the north to the south. So that's and I was really learning. The more further I went back, the more I was learning. Truly, we was a part of the Tuscarora that left here.
Yeah, that's how the Harper's Ferry got its name today.
Yeah,
that second James Lowrie. Right.
Now the first James Lowrie, he was in Edenton County, Bertie County. And the courthouse there has an Indian head on each corner of that courthouse. He was the first appointed judge in that courthouse. And he married a full-blooded Tuscarora Indian over that reservation, the first James. And he was from England.
Do you remember her name? Was that...
Well, I did hear her name called once. It was Sally Kersey.
Now, was that the judge's wife, or was that his son's wife?
I think that was his son's wife.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Sally Kersey was a man named Thomas Kersey's daughter.
Yeah.
He fought in the French and Indian War.
Yeah.
One of the Tuscarora volunteers. And from those two people, all Lowries descend from those two people today.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Yeah. That's the way I find it. And she was a full-blooded Tuscarora Indian over that reservation that he married. And that's where we originated from my mother's side. Back to that second James Lowrie and Sally Kersey.
Now, Miss Leola, when did the real movement for especially the Hatteras Tuscarora, when did that come about? Was that the late 60s when that name was chosen?
What, the name Tuscarora?
Well, the specific name that you all were going after, the Hatteras Tuscarora name, when you started working with the BIA and the Commission on Indian Affairs up in Washington. Do you remember why the name ECIO came about over there at Keevers and Prospect? The Hatteras Tuscarora name came first. Is that right?
Yeah. We were the first group to petition. Our petition went in first, good bit ahead of the rest of the, and different groups got to wanting to petition. When the Lumbees found out we had petition, seemed like they got upset. Then they went to saying there's a going petition. So I was told that my petition that I had sent in was the truest petition that had ever been sent in. It was true.
Who was the main person that helped you on writing that petition?
Well, I had got up a lot of research when we got Wes White, right?
Yeah.
And he could have done more, but the Lumbees found out he was working with us. And when I found out he was working with them and coming back to us, I wanted to drop him.
And he's been working for them ever since then, hasn't he?
Yeah. I wanted to drop Wes because I knew he weren't doing what he was supposed to do and was paying.
How do you feel about now? There's been a lot of people that have stated, or some of their feelings were that Wes took a lot of information that you all had,
From me and take it to them.
and that it's in their control today. Is
Yeah.
that right? Do you know if they've actually tried to use any of that information in their own petition?
Yeah, from my petition, they got a lot. From my petition, to go in their petition.
How do you feel about that? Did they ever ask you
No.
anything about anything like that?
They'd come and ask me, but I wouldn't talk to none of them.
When you did get the petition in, what was their I'm talking about the BIA now. What was their final determination or reason why the petition couldn't go any further? I remember reading. I've got a copy of what they call a obvious deficiencies letter. That's when you sent the petition in, and then they sent you a letter back telling that you had to do certain this and this and this and this. And basically, from what I could gather from that letter, they were just giving you the runaround. They were just coming up with any reason they could to put you off and make you wait. But what was their final? Do you remember what the last thing that they said that told you that you couldn't go forward anymore?
Well, they said I had enough. At that time, we had organized enough to have got recognition, and I had enough in it to get recognition and to recognize as a tribe. But there was so many different little groups down here saying they was chief for the Tuscaroras. That one saying he was chief for the Tuscaroras. That one saying he was chief. So it would have looked much nicer and much better if they'd have pulled in with the ones that was already there and could prove where it originated from. So that if they'd just pulled in with the ones that was already in, they called it the floor map for the tribe, the floor map, and said there was already enough in to prove where we originated from and where our ancestors, who they were, and all the other little groups could have just joined it in with our group and have made it much wider, much powerful.
Right. You know, and that's a lot of times that's the reasoning that they give even today, that they won't help any of the Tuscaroras here because there's so many different groups.
So many different groups.
But actually, again, it gives them an excuse not to do anything.
not to do anything.
And but when it comes down to it, they could actually do something for one group, knowing that everybody else was going to benefit and eventually
Yeah.
take part anyway. But the government uses that
And
as
now
an
they
easy
said,
excuse.
says you're really famous. Says I'm proud of you. To know that you really dug far enough to find out who your ancestors was and where you originated from. And says your petition is the truest petition that's ever been up here. And I was the very first and was presented, weren't it, Lane? It was. I was way ahead of it.
Right. You know, those petitioning requirements that started in 1978, and yeah, like I said, you were number 15. That petition was number 15 of all the petitions in the whole country. I think the Lumbees were they finally got theirs in about 6 or 7 years later.
Right.
But yeah, that's and today, what's happening with the Hatteras Tuscarora name now?
Well, right now it looks like this is a standstill, but I have been told it could be finished easy. I was up there in a meeting and I testified, and I told them I helped my brothers where there was only 2 groups recognized by the federal government or the local government as there was Hatteras Tuscaroras and the Eastern Band of Cherokee. That's the only 2 groups was ever recognized. The only 2 groups that's ever been recognized were the Hatteras Tuscaroras and Eastern Band of Cherokees.
Mm-hmm. That was in 1991 when you testified. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know Senator Irving? He was a senator.
Sam Irving.
Sam Irving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got in touch with him. Somehow I got in touch with him. And he told me he was going to put his Constitution staff to do a research to help me out, to find out some things. And he did. And they sent it through the Department of the Interior, so that they couldn't state it had been stolen or nothing. And they got it before I got it, that research. And when they got it all up together and sent it through there, then this man come in early one morning, he called us, says, Leola, what you know, your environment. I got good news to tell you. I got your land title. He says it's going to be in your package and your treaty. So when it come, it was in there, the package. The title was in there for the land and the treaty. And there was 3 states give to the Tuscaroras by the King of England to the first James Lowrie. See, the second James, that was James Lowrie's son. And the Tuscarora, full Tuscarora Indian was his mother over that reservation. And the title was in there for 3 states. North Carolina, and South Carolina, and Georgia. And it was cut up in counties. And James Lowrie, second James Lowrie, he had the power to give this land back to the Indians. And the treaty stated that there was a part of the Tuscaroras left here, I think it was the 1700s, and went to New York to join our part. They wanted to come back, but they couldn't in the situation they were in. They joined into our part Confederacy up up there in New York. The reason they couldn't come back and join us.
What happened with those documents that were sent down here? You said there was a land title to.
Yeah, and they ain't a man in North Carolina, or South Carolina, or Georgia has a clear title to their land. They're a clear deed. It's a deed of trust. If you look at it, mine's a deed of trust. My deed. They don't have a clear title.
So you're talking about the title that he sent you was for all three of those states?
Yeah,
Wow.
3 states.
Do you still have copies of those?
I tell you, Cornell wanted to get me treated, and he wanted to get my title. Said he was going to Washington. He had to go up with a lawyer, and the lawyer was going to get a judge, have a court out there. They were going to show all of this to the judge. And he promised me faithfully to take care of it and bring it back to me. He ain't done it till today.
How long has that been?
And my treaty.
Was that around the same time that the movie was being made?
Been
We're
about
making that move, yeah.
2 years ago he got that stuff.
How long has it been to make that move?
Oh, the movie's been made, and it was in '99.
Well, that's when he is in making that move is when he got it.
But I've got to have it back. Yeah, that was important stuff, I'm telling you. You know what Pavel Sam Irving had up there. And he pulled that constitutional staff to do that research.
Do you remember about what year that was when that took place?
It was somewhere in the 70s.
Yeah, it was in the 70s, called Opposition in the 80s.
That's interesting.
I had over 2,000 organized on that petition.
That was your enrollment that you.
That was my
Put in.
name.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, that was one of the things that they were saying to you in that letter that they sent back to you that the names that you sent in, they couldn't understand the difference between them and the Lumbees. And that was one of the questions that they asked you to show a distinction between them. And okay, we're gonna take a short intermission, then we'll get back into the interview about Henry Bear Lowrie.
Was it Eaton, y'all?
Eaton.
Eaton?
No, Lowrie.
But anyhow, they went to the courthouse up there. That's when the segregation come about you about the schools. And it was said back then, the black and white must go together. We weren't saying nothing about Indians. When they went up there that day, and that judge told them, a federal judge, and he told them, he said, now if you come here under Lumbee, I cannot help you. But there's a name, and it's available. If you people take that name, you can get something done. The Tuscarora name. So he told us that day, that's what we would. And said, if y'all would come out, if you'd have come here on the Tuscarora, I could have helped you. I could have done something for you. Well, I hadn't over here to tell it to that day.
Do you remember that judge's name? Was it Varsser?
Oh Lord, it might have been. But we started working then with that name, Tuscarora. But when we started working with that name of where we'd go was fight and turned down. They just didn't, cause they knew it was an established name. We've already been recognized.
Yeah, we've been recognized
Right.
for years. And the
If
judge,
this-
he told him that day, he says, I can't help you on the Lumbee. There's an available name out there and it's available. y'all will take that name and go with it to get your school, your land, and everything you're entitled to. That the government owes you. Then you'll get it all back. Lumbees, they wouldn't, they just didn't want that name.
Do you think it had a lot to do with the state pressuring them not to listen to this judge?
Probably did.
And Mr. Lehman, you mentioned earlier that before that time you had never heard in school or anything the word Tuscarora, did you?
Tuscarora. You didn't pay it any attention. I mean, you know, but all, well,
I had doing some research back a long time before we had daycares up there.
But like growing up in grade school or school in general, you never heard the word Tuscarora, did you?
it was hid from us.
Then when you were born, the people were recognized as Cherokees of Robeson County, wasn't that right?
Probably so, yeah.
You were born before '56, right?
1939.
1939. So there's no way you could be a Lumbean.
No,
could you?
sir.
How about you, Miss Leola? How do you feel about the name Lumbee and what it's done to the people here?
Well, we're proud beside of our rights. And there's no such name as I could ever find as Lumbee. That name comes from the river, Lumber River. And there's no such name as Lumbee. All I could ever find in all the research I ever done was Tuscarora and the Cherokees.
And where did you first hear about the Hatteras name?
Well, Reading would say Hatteras. They left, like you named the Croatan Indians, they left a group of their people over here, the Hatteras people, and when they come back, they were gone. And when they found them, they was mixed already then with the Indians. The white man had mixed in with the Indians.
You're talking about the Lost Colony.
Yeah. And that's
Okay.
where the Hatteras come about.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but there was a probably the correct spelling and pronunciation would be the Gatteras, or some people might say Catiras. That was a Tuscarora village that was known as early as 1650. It was spelled Kateras, and Hatteras is Hateras. Only difference being that K and H. But the Mr. McMillan, he always spoke about a George Lowrie, who got up when he was giving one of his speeches and said that he had always heard that our people were Hatteras Indians. Now how true and how well he knew how to pronounce it, or how well it was reported by McMillan that he pronounced it. For all we know, he could have said he'd always heard that we were Tuscarora.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of us feel that Mr. McMillan was the first of many people like him, like the McIntyres and the Charlie Roses and the Sam Irvins and people all the way back throughout history who said that they were going to do the right thing for our people. And all the while, the only thing they were doing was keeping our history hidden from us.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Mr. Lehman said, most people didn't know anything about Tuscarora because they were, for the last 100 years, we were always named something else. our people would always believe that the government was going to do the right thing, and come to find out that's not what happened. But if we could start talking about Henry Berry Lowry. Henry Berry Lowry today is a hero to not only Tuscarora people, but just about every Lumbee person you know today truly believes that Henry Berry Lowry was a Lumbee. Since you're some of his direct descendancy, if you could explain how the family feels, or your personal feelings about how you feel about them thinking that he's a Lumbee even today.
Lumbee didn't come out to 1956, right? Henry Berry Lowry was here in the 1800s. How could he have been a Lumbee when that name was never thought of and didn't come about to then? Henry Berry would come out, his people come out of Bertie County as Tuscaroras. If his mother had it in her veins, how come he didn't have it in his?
That's right.
I'd like them to recognize him for what he is. If they can't, they just leave him alone. Let him rest in peace. He's gone, he's been here and he's done his thing. And I believe if he was sure that then they'd call him a Lumbee something that he weren't, he'd let them know who he was, where he originated, and where he come from. And I just don't feel, just don't like that word I'm calling him, what he calling him something that he weren't.
How does your family feel about it today? Like your kids and grandkids?
They don't like it.
Have they ever come home to you from school and told you something that you knew wasn't true? As far as them, like today, that they teach the kids in school that Henry was in fact a Lumbee back in the 1800s.
If they ever name it to mine now, I don't know nothing. I mean, they don't never mention it. I'll be fair with you now. They don't mention it to me because they know how I feel about it.
Right. Okay.
My wife said here some time ago to shoot it on the Discovery Channel about Henry Berry. And it's got to talking, and she said when they got to saying it's a Lumbee, she knew how I felt. And she just turned it from it because she said she knew how we felt about him, calling him that, and he not a Lumbee.
Yeah, that brings me to another point. She said, the Discovery Channel has a show about him. The History Channel, my uncle from Evansville, Indiana, called just last week and said 2 weeks ago he saw the same show on the History Channel talking about Henry Berry Lowry and the Lumbee people and how he was a Lumbee, and so that my point is that these lies have gone further than just Robeson County.
Mm-hmm.
These lies and the dishonesty and revising history has gone worldwide now. And that's why we wanted to get some of his direct descendants on videotape to be able to send this all over the world for people to get it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Because Tim is kin to Henry. I'm kin to Henry. There's thousands of people kin to Henry, but we can't say that we're direct descendants from him, and so we can't say that we speak on his family's behalf.
Well, when his daughter died, that would have left her children, the grandchildren. Then when all them died, that would have put us next kin to him that's living, his great-grandchildren. Right. And if we're gone today, then that would put our children to step in and now I got some more first cousin in that, my Aunt Rita's children. I reckon they could care less about it. You can get talking to them about it, they want to get off on something else, they don't want.
Yeah,
I
that's,
told him here a while back, I said, we should have a big day, have it at the recreation, and perhaps a Henry Berry Library, let his family come together and have a big day of him. And, some of them spoke up and said, oh Lord, if you do that, everybody and his brother will be coming and saying this kin to Henry Berry. I said, well,
Let them come.
well, you know, being kin to them is one thing, but are you talking about a direct lines? Yeah, there are a lot of people that say that there are direct lines that they can't go back to the same people that you've named off. Now, while we're at that, could you refresh everybody's memory as to how many children Henry and Rhoda actually had?
Leo will probably tell you that.
He had one name.
Oh, Rhoda and Henry Berry had 3 children.
3.
C.N. and the Calder boy buddy, I don't remember. I believe his name was Henry Berry too.
They named him after his daddy.
Well,
And her other sister called her Sis. Now, what her right name? That's back then people's nickname, and that's what they called them.
and your descendancy comes from
Polly,
Polly,
C.N.
Celia Ann. Now, was she the oldest?
I didn't think she was the oldest. I think
She might have been the baby one of them.
Okay, I think there was a girl born first, but I wasn't sure.
Sis.
Okay.
I reckon my grandmother was the baby girl.
and Hezekiah was her husband's name.
Hezekiah.
Her sister's husband.
Now, and then let's if we could, let's do your short genealogy back to Henry. Okay, Henry's daughter Nellie was your grandmother. Grandmother. And then what was it the family called her? Her nickname?
Polly.
That was her. Okay. And then how do you descend from her?
I'm her grandson.
Is that
Her daughter was my mama.
her daughter was your mom?
My mama.
Okay. And what was your mama's name?
Pearl.
Pearl.
Pearl Lowrie.
Pearl Lowrie. Okay. And you all had the same parents.
Yep.
And how many brothers and sisters did you all have?
I had 3 brothers and 5 sisters.
Could you name those for us?
Yes, sir. Floyd Locklear, Archie Locklear, Bessie Mae Locklear, Polly Brayboy, Josephine Thompson, Leo Locklear, and Lois Locklear.
Okay. And how many brothers and sisters did your mother have?
She had Leola, which I was named after. Reedy Chapin. And Libby Locklear. And Danny Lowrie. Was that another brother she had like?
Uncle Calvin.
And Calvin,
Then she had a sister, Willie. Do you know what you call
Willie,
her? Mary Jane
and Mary Jane,
and Lawrence Lowrie.
and Lawrence Lowrie.
Okay. The last time we spoke, Mr. Lehman, we were telling you or asking you if you remembered that blanket that today the Lumbees use that what they call the pine needle patchwork in the women's dresses, and that design comes from one of, I guess it's supposed to have been Polly's blankets, and the blanket had all these circles on it. And are you either of you familiar on how they got their hands on that blanket? Today it's at the college.
Not less,
That's at the museum up there in
not
Peterborough.
less than Aunt Reedy would have had it. And I let Adolph Dahl have it. That's the only way I could figure it to come about.
It's Reedy Chavis.
Reedy Chambers. Would have let, cause he'd go there and he'd get different stuff from, I think. And he might have seen it and she let him have it.
No, is she the one that had the family Bible
Yeah.
also? Okay. Now, you know this. You mentioned Mr. Adolph Dial. Did Mr. Adolph over the years ever come to either of you and want to interview you or borrow things from you that were in reference to Henry Berry, like photographs or anything? Okay.
He didn't think we were no related to him. He'd always go to Aunt Reedy.
Okay. Do you know if she claimed if she was on the Lumbee rolls before she died?
Not that I know of.
Reading?
Yes, ma'am.
No, they didn't appreciate that name.
They didn't.
Weren't none of them, no, there weren't none of them would appreciate it, except that name.
Okay.
They didn't like it a bit. They
She'd
didn't
tell
like
you
it.
right quick that her mama wasn't in Long Beach. She's a Tuscaloosa.
That's the reason I never would go to Strike It to Win. I never have been to it, cause the name that was carrying it on them.
Well, you know that in the show, I was in it for 6 years, and in it, well, in the show, it never mentions the word Lumbee.
It's Tuscaloosa.
It mentions Tuscarora 2 or 3 times, but when they promote it and when they talk about it to get people to come to it, they get people to believe that he was Lumbee, and they say that he is the hero to the Lumbee people, but they don't fill in all the details with people like they should. And if we could talk to you now about things like this, like the most recent thing about Strike It to Win is that they're putting out these statues of Henry Berry.
Mm-hmm.
What are your feelings on something like that?
We don't like it.
Have they ever come to either of you or any of your other siblings and talked about that or asked permission?
I will try to find out who gave him permission or where did he get the permission to make this statue of Henry Berry Lowrie.
Now, how does these things make you feel? I mean, I guess Chris has sort of asked the question, but I want to ask it again. I mean,
Makes me feel bad.
you know, when you've got the Robertsonian newspaper, you've got the Fayetteville newspaper.
I get angry.
You know, I mean, all these. But you know, you're both Christian people,
Yeah.
and the news people who report these things are supposed to be truthful, because we as readers or we as people who watch television, we count on the news of all people to be truthful. We count on the History Channel to be truthful. And you both know that they've always reported Henry Berry Lowrie by siding with the Lumbees that he was Lumbee, but how does that really make you feel? I mean, you know, to know that they're not being truthful in that way. I mean,
Sometimes I get angry, well, if I hadn't been a Christian and trying to do the will of the Lord, then I never had that Strike It to Win.
I mean, ain't nothing
My
wrong.
aunt went over there one night, Aunt Liz, and my Aunt Rita had to take out of her and leave with her. She got her pistol. She was fixing to use it.
I don't see nothing wrong with having that play over there to let them know, you know, what went on, how he stood for the people.
right.
As long as he used him as what he was.
Right. We see Geronimo. That's the thing about history. Geronimo, you know, history says he was an Apache. You know, someone like Sitting Bull or someone like Crazy Horse. You know, they state the fact that they were part of the Oglala or you know, the Lakota people, you know, of South Dakota, and and that's the same thing here. You know, you're wanting the history to say, you know, because in the Indian way it says when you stand before God and you stand before the Creator, you know, in your afterlife, when you take your journey from this world to the next world, you're going to be with your ancestors, you know. And so, you know, you're going to recognize them and they're going to recognize you. And so it is important that the truth, you know, of his tribe or his nation be told. You know, because,
Yeah.
you know yourself, I mean, that means everything in a lot of places. In Indian country, when you go out and visit with other tribes, you know, knowing who you are is always the most important thing, it seems. Even with the petition, like, you know, to the federal government for recognition, you know, your tribal identity is always the very first and most important thing. And then everything else comes after that. And, you know, the Lumbees have tried time and time again, as they're doing today, to use him as a hero, to use him in that history of the 1800s, which is important to show him in the 1800s, you know, that Tuscarora activity or that native activity in Robinson County, and they use him as a Lumbee in that way. And I think it's important that people understand your feelings about it.
I think what they should have done was to come to some of his close relatives to find out if it would have been all right to use his name Islam, but which they never did do it. I said one time he didn't have no relatives back here living. They said he didn't have none.
Who said that?
Part of the Lumbees. I've heard that they said they didn't have
No direct descendants.
no direct descendants.
Yeah, you had mentioned that too, Mr. Lehman, that you'd heard that they said they didn't have any more descendants left.
Yeah.
Now, did you ever hear stories about? Well, let's go ahead and get this out of the way. You know, there's always been rumors about what happened to Henry. Some say that he went to Texas. Some, like in the show, it says that it leads people to believe that he went to Texas, somewhere like that. And then this book says certain things, and all these different books have different theories about what actually happened to him. Would you all like to explain once and for all that what's been passed down through generations as to what happened?
Well, the only thing I can tell you that what my grandmother told me about him. Said he left home one evening and told Rhodey he'd be back shortly. Said about 10 o'clock that night, it seemed somebody got up on top of the house and was walking around. Said pretty shortly after that, two of his men come up. One had his gun and one had his watch. And told them where they had met that evening. Henry went to was going to claim his gun, went to set it down, and that hammer caught in that top of that boot and went off and killed him. And he said he buried him and wouldn't tell nobody where they buried him at, on account of his reward out for him. As far as him leaving from here, she said her daddy didn't leave from here. Now that's as far as I can go. He probably knew where he was buried at, but they wouldn't tell nobody.
Said the going of his body and that reward was died. Nobody would never know going of his body. And said that now they said like you said he had left and went to was it Georgia? Missouri.
Well, he said he went to different places.
That was, you know, his son was named after him. They said that was the one that left, his son, and never come back. His son was the one that left.
And he was killed down in Georgia, is that right?
Right.
His son, yeah.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I've seen his name, Henry Delano. Delana.
And all I ever knew, they ain't reading. I'm gonna call him Uncle Bud, yeah. She might have known got to see him that much.
Did she ever talk about Rhoda?
No, cause she was. My mama was 9 years old when her grandmother was buried.
Okay.
The only thing they said you could remember going to Harpy's Ferry, and that's what was going to her funeral.
There to Rhoda's?
Rhoda's funeral.
Yes, Rhoda's buried right there on the other side of the river, isn't she?
Now the older might remember hearing her mama talk about when I was so young, I couldn't never remember hearing mama say nothing about it. Can you?
She said, I hear her talk about how her mother was strongly to protect her house. You know, not let nobody come in and take over her house. She was strongly to protect her house. Did you tell them about the son who went up there and she had it locked up in a big white cloth?
There's probably so many stories you all have heard over the years, it's hard to remember all of them, isn't it?
And you get to getting on up in age, you get to getting things.
Well, yeah, and that's another reason why this is, us doing this is going to be good. It's going to be good for your descendants to be able to see, and others as well. We'll hear it straight from his ancestors.
Here a few years ago, we went to Washington. I went with the Locklear boys from over here.
Ray and Charles.
Yeah. And they was up there that day. This lady was just talking about the Lumbees, being Lumbees down there, said everybody was up under that umbrella as the Lumbees. And she spoke up and said, if I was to move down there, and she was a white lady, said if I was to move to North Carolina, I'd have to go up under that umbrella too. And the boy spoke and said, well, black or white, you can be Lumbees, can't you? She shook her head, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is Ray and Charles, are they the name of their group is Tuscarora's East of the Mountains, is that right? Now, are they,
I don't believe they're doing nothing now.
well, are they carrying on what the Hatteras Tuscaroras were doing years
Well,
ago?
they're just trying to, but they didn't. I don't know what happened.
They went up there, I think I was told. They went up there one time, or maybe twice, and wanted to take over where our petition dropped off and carry it on out. And they was told they couldn't do that. The group that really got up that history, it couldn't be taken over. They'd have to come back and finish up what they started. And they always called it the foot road, the foot map of North Carolina, that petition. And they told time after time it was the truest history had ever been over when we moved for it. It finally got there. It says, Leo, we want you to know you're famous. You're famous up here. I said, I want to be famous down here. I want it to go on through. And that's what he told me then. He said, all these other little groups saying this chief of the Tuscarora and this is chief. At one time now, it was pushing strong. I even got something in papers. Anybody wanted to be a part of a tribe, fill it out, you know, and fill it out and see if they could get back to this group. Some of them could, through the bloodline. Some of them could. And I got several of them filled out and I sent them back. They said that'd be attached on to my petition.
Miss Leola, do you remember Dr. Peter Wood?
Yeah.
Excuse me. How did you get in touch with him?
Peter Wood.
He was the history professor up at Duke University. Were you working with him in the early '90s when he wrote that book about you and your family? And he was writing on. It was called the Hatteras Tuscarora Foundation. I got a copy of it from him about a year ago, and in the back of it, it's got genealogy, your family genealogy, and these different charts, and it was showing he was showing in that book the migration patterns on when and how our people came in here and where they came from within the state. Do you remember that book? Do you remember working with him?
I believe I might have. Did you ever remember Ray Butler?
No, ma'am. I don't remember that name.
He worked with us for a while too.
Okay.
Well, there was so many and hard to remember all them people.
Yeah, that's true. It's Now, did you go up to Washington during the takeover? Did either of y'all go to the BIA takeover? Do you remember what happened to all those documents that, I know they came and got a lot of them. The FBI came and got them, but what do you all remember about that part of history? About what was going on back then?
Well, we met up there with a bunch of Indians from other reservations, and they didn't like the way it was being treated on the reservations. And we was up there about 2 weeks, weren't we?
I believe it was.
How many people do you remember from here going up there?
200 or 300 in.
Oh, was it? That many stayed that whole time?
Well, I wouldn't say it stayed the whole time. I did that many.
Coming and
The
going?
majority of them stayed.
Okay.
The movement of that group was the AIM. Dennis Banks and Russell Maines and Vernonville Corps.
Mm-hmm.
So when they got up there, they told them, says, we're the landlords of this country. We come up here to talk business with the president, the head of fishes. We've always been treated like dogs, and they're still treating us like dogs. And we come up, said people from overseas have come over here. They're putting the finest motels there is in Washington, D.C. We the landlords of this country. We come up here to talk. We still be put along with the rats. So they had got them a church and we'll put them in the basement of that church. They said, I say that building belongs to us, the interior department. So we're going and taking. So that's what they done.
Okay, so they were actually up there doing something else and then decided
Well,
once
that's
they got
what they
there.
went on about the way the Indians is all over the Indians is all the Indians being treated by the federal government.
That was the Trail of Broken Tears, wasn't it? Or, I'm sorry, Trail of Broken Treaties.
Yeah.
That's what they call it. Well, we're going to wrap it up by getting back to this situation about how Henry Berry Lowry is perceived. if you all had your way, if you could make things happen just at the snap of your fingers, what was something that you would change the way history had been taught in the schools, or how the Lumbees are using Henry to benefit them?
Well, I'd say that if I could stop it right now, I would stop that name, Lumbee, off of him, Henry Berry. Let him be known of what he was. If they can't call him that, then don't call him nothing at all. They can't use what he was in 1800. Don't put something on him in 2008 that is a Lumbee, and he weren't such a thing as a Lumbee back then.
Okay.
That's what I'd say too.
And another thing too, Papa, it tell you to, you got to go down that Pembroke to get a card to prove that I ain't got to have no card proving that I'm Indian. I'd point one and I'd die one. And that, me going to Pembroke to get a Lumbee card, that doesn't say that I'm Indian. When the federal government tells me that I've got to have a card, then that's when I go get it. I won't have to wait till they send it to you.
Hey.
When I testified that day, I told them there weren't but two groups here I recognized, the Tuscaroras and the Cherokees, by the federal government or the local government. Adolph got so mad with me. He got real mad with me.
Adolph Dow.
Yeah. But the narrator had told the truth. There ain't but two groups here recognized, the Tuscaroras and the Eastern Band of Cherokees. And some of the Tuscaroras I told you left here and went to New York and joined the Dark Park and stuff.
Well, he's wanting to know how do you feel about Henry Berry, what they'll call
Oh
him.
Lord, if I could do it tonight, it'd never be called another Lumbee Indian, because he weren't. He weren't. Now I know enough from the history and got up to my ancestors, and that's who they were. That's where I originated from. That's the main thing they said you'd have to do in Washington to become a tribe, is to tell where you originate, what tribe did you originate from, and could you prove that? So that's what I done. I go out and find it. I had to go to different places, and everywhere I went, that's what it was.
Well, how do you feel, because, a lot of people who know the history, I mean, they know that, like, when the Hatteras, Tuscaroras began to organize, you were the one of the peoples who brought, Wes White here into this community. He found a lot of the genealogy and a lot of the research for you. How did you feel when he left from working with you? And you had paid him, you had gotten grants to compensate him, and he was agreeing with your history about Tuscarora. How did it make you feel when he left and took your history and took your information over to the Lumbee?
Real angry with Wes. My husband got real angry too, and a lot more people got angry the way he done, that he didn't do what he promised to do.
Right.
And they didn't think he was taking parts of my works, carrying them over to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like it, and I told him I didn't like it, and I just threw him off.
Mm-hmm.
So we had no more dealings with him.
Right. Would you consider him a truthful person today, or
No.
a person that would have any a reason to listen to him about history?
I could never trust him no more.
Miss Leola, you're testifying in Congress in 1991. How easy was it to be able to get on that panel to speak? The reason I ask is, past few years especially, we've tried to get on the panel to testify, and we never get any response. We never get any kind of call back from Congress telling us when it's going to happen. How were you able to get on there?
Well, I had people up there helping me, pulling for me, like Sam Irvin, different ones.
Now, and after you said what you did, were you still treated the same way up in Washington? Or do you remember?
Yeah, I was treated special, except they all got mad when I testified to the truth.
I believe that data, buddy. She's talking about it. The Lumbees had met there, and we went too. And that's when they had to let us talk and let the Lumbees talk. But now, they wouldn't let us do too much talking. They either find out what we was and who we was, then they
And what you had to say?
shut us off. And my nephew Joe, I don't know, you probably knew him. He told my sister that day, says, I don't know but one thing to do. If I first go get us a lawyer and sue these people, you ought to hear it. No, don't do that, don't do that.
Okay, we're going to stop right here.